I texted our family group chat. "Surgery's on the 12th. Just need a ride home," Brooke replied in seconds. "LOL, you thought we'd miss Cabo for that?" Mum followed. "Don't guilt us." I stared at the screen, feeling years of quiet sacrifices collapse into 2 words I typed back. My mistake. 4 days later, Mum called the hospital. The nurse's answer shattered their vacation smiles. But by then I'd already decided something dangerous and freeing. I could make it home without them. And maybe, for the first time, I didn't need them at all. The phone screen still glowed in my hand, the 3 grey dots of the chat typing indicator gone. Silence now. My thumb hovered over the keyboard as if something else might come, as if Brooke's LOL had been a typo, as if Mum's "don't guilt us" was just a bad joke. But the apartment was so still, I could hear the low hum of the fridge, the ticking of the cheap wall clock, the faint hiss of the heater that never worked right. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. The laminate was peeling in the corners, the fake wood grain worn smooth where I always stood to pay bills, sign forms, write checks that were never for me. The weight of history pressed in. I saw Brooke at 22 calling me in tears from the side of the highway. Her new car had been rear-ended, no insurance. I had driven 2 hours and put the repair on my credit card. She promised she'd pay me back when things settled. They never did. I saw Mum 2 years after Dad died, sitting at the dining room table with the mortgage notice spread out like a surrender flag. Her voice shaking as she asked if I could just cover this month until she figured something out. She never did. My half of Dad's insurance payout disappeared into that house, and I never lived there again. There was Nana too, 4 months of me driving across town after work to change her dressings, wash her hair, cook meals soft enough for her failing teeth. Mum was too busy. Brooke didn't do well with medical stuff. When Nana passed, they both cried the loudest at the funeral. And now here I was, asking for the smallest thing. Not money, not months of care, just a ride home, a warm body, in a chair until I was steady on my feet. I had imagined Brooke rolling her eyes but saying, "Fine." I had pictured Mom sighing but agreeing. I hadn't pictured being dismissed like a spam call. The glow of my phone caught my eye again. No new messages. The chat thread sat frozen. My request, Brooke's laugh, Mum's rebuke. I typed 2 words, my mistake, not an apology, not really. More like a period at the end of a long sentence I'd been writing since childhood. I opened the rideshare app and scheduled a pickup for next Thursday at 4 p.m. from Riverside Surgical Centre to my apartment. The estimate was $27. I'd pay it myself, like I paid for everything else. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The faint lines between my brows, the shadows under my eyes. I tried to remember the last time I had looked rested. It might have been high school before life turned into a constant ledger of what I gave and what I went without. The kettle whistled. I made tea. I didn't want just to have something warm in my hands. The steam fogged my glasses. Somewhere in the building, a neighbour's TV laughed for me. I thought about texting a friend, but the words knotted in my throat before they could hit my thumbs. I didn't want the pity, the inevitable. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to admit that my family, the people who should be my net, were the ones cutting the ropes. The apartment clock ticked over to midnight. I rinsed the mug, set it on the counter, and pulled my phone from the charger. Still no messages. I checked the scheduled ride one more time, confirming the driver's note, Patient pickup, post-procedure. Please assist to car. The little checkbox felt pathetic. I crawled into bed, the sheets cold, the silence thicker now. My phone was on the nightstand, screen dark. Somewhere out there, Mom and Brooke were probably finalising their Cabo itinerary, deciding which swimsuits to pack, which captions to post. I closed my eyes and told myself it didn't matter. That next Thursday I'd get into a stranger's car, ride home and sleep off the anaesthesia alone. That I'd survive like I always did. And yet, under the blanket, my fists stayed curled, long after sleep took me. The 3 grey dots blinked like a heartbeat on the screen, then vanished. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the group chat. The room smelled faintly of burnt toast from breakfast I never ate, the tile cold against my bare feet. Outside, January wind rattled the window panes. Inside, the silence felt colder. I held my breath, waiting for something. Maybe Brooke's, JK, maybe Mom's, of course we'll be there. My thumb hovered over the phone like I could will a different answer into existence. But nothing came. The steam from the kettle curled in the air, blurring the edges of the counter where I had balanced my phone bills last week, shifting money from my savings to cover rent. I set the phone down, screen up, the chat still frozen. My request, Brooke's mocking laugh, Mom's clipped refusal. And suddenly, like an old film reel flickering to life, I was back at Dad's funeral. The air smelled of lilies and rain. Evelyn, Mom, sat hunched in black, hands trembling as the lawyer slid 2 envelopes across the table, equal halves of Dad's life insurance. I remember her voice breaking, saying she couldn't keep the house without help. I'd pressed my envelope into her hand before she could even finish. "It's okay," I'd said. "You need it more." She had, and I never saw a dime of it again. The memory dissolved, replaced by another, me at 25, outside a trendy brunch spot, Brooke leaning against my car in oversized sunglasses. "Forgot my wallet," she'd chirped. It happened so often it became a script, sometimes a forgotten purse, sometimes a lost card. The bill always ended up in my hands. She'd post a photo of her mimosa with the caption, "Blessed," tagging the place as if she'd paid. The kettle clicked off. I poured water over a tea bag, watching it bleed amber, my mind replaying those moments like a cruel montage. Years of giving, of stepping in so no one else had to be uncomfortable. My phone buzzed. For a split second, my chest lifted. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe guilt had finally cracked through. The notification wasn't from the family chat. It was an email from my insurance provider. "Suspicious activity detected on your account. Please review recent claims." A cold knot formed in my stomach. I tapped the link, scanning the list. One entry stood out, a Botox treatment billed under my policy just last week in a Beverly Hills clinic. My eyes caught the provider's note, cosmetic, non-therapeutic. I didn't need to guess who it was. The tea sat cooling on the counter as my pulse pounded in my ears. They weren't just unwilling to help me, they were draining me. Even now, even days before I went under anaesthesia. The faint hope I'd clung to of some last-minute ride, a text, a call, snapped clean in 2. I typed my mistake into the group chat and hit send. Not because I was sorry, because it was the cleanest way to end a conversation that should have ended years ago. Then I opened the rideshare app and scheduled my pickup. The driver's name was Miguel, and he'd arrive at 4 p.m. next Thursday. I added a note for assistance to the car, not because I thought anyone would see it as care, but because anaesthesia made people unsteady. and I refused to end up face first on the sidewalk. I set the phone down and wrapped my hands around the cooling mug. The bitterness of the tea matched the taste in my mouth. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, I felt the first stirrings of something dangerous and unfamiliar, the thought that I might be done being the family's safety net. The surgical centre smelled faintly of antiseptic and something warmer, maybe the coffee drifting from the nurse's station down the hall. I was in a thin hospital gown, socks with rubber grips, my clothes folded in a plastic bag under the bed. The walls were pale blue, meant to be calming, but my pulse thudded in my ears. Clara, the pre-op nurse, had kind eyes that seemed to understand things without me saying them. She checked my chart, her touch brisk but gentle as she adjusted the IV line. "You'll be in and out before you know it," she said, like she'd said it 100 times before. The OR lights were bright enough to erase the edges of the world. Stainless steel gleamed under their glare. Monitors beeped, rhythmic and sure. The anesthesiologist introduced himself, his voice a muffled hum under my own racing thoughts. The last thing I felt was Clara's warm hand on mine, a quiet squeeze before the world dropped away. When I opened my eyes, the light had changed. Softer now, filtered through blinds in the recovery room. My throat felt raw, my mouth tasted of plastic and something bitter. A wave of nausea climbed fast, and I barely turned in time for Clara to slide a small bin under my chin. "Easy," she murmured, rubbing slow circles on my back as I retched. "Anesthesia does that to some folks." I nodded, wiping my mouth, blinking against the haze. Instinct sent my hand searching for my phone on the tray beside me. The screen lit up. No new messages. Not from Brooke. Not from Mom. Not even a curt, "Hope it went well." Just the same old silence. My thumb flicked toward Instagram without thinking. The muscle memory stronger than my better judgment. Brooke's story loaded instantly. She was poolside in Cabo, bikini straps glinting in the sun, holding a coconut with a straw. The caption read, "Manifesting health, wealth, and hot weather." Cabo Diaries. My stomach turned again, but it wasn't just the anesthesia. Clara was checking my vitals, noting them on her clipboard. "You've got a ride on the way?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, the word catching on my tongue. "Uber." Her brows lifted just slightly, then smoothed. "You don't have anyone to take you?" They had other plans. She didn't pry, just handed me a small packet of crackers. "Eat a little before you go. It'll help." I nibbled one corner, the salt grounding me for a moment. Across the room, another patient stirred as their spouse adjusted the blanket, whispered something that made them smile. The contrast was a knife. Miguel, my driver, texted that he was out front. Clara wheeled me down the hall, the squeak of the chair's wheels echoing in the sterile corridor. The automatic doors opened to a blast of cold air. Miguel was leaning against a silver sedan, scrolling his phone. He straightened when he saw us, taking my small overnight bag from Clara. "Seat's warm," he said with a quick smile. The ride was quiet, except for the low hum of the heater. I watched the city slip past, the winter afternoon already leaning toward dusk. Storefronts, traffic lights, strangers crossing streets, life moving on, indifferent to mine. When we pulled up to my building, Miguel offered to walk me to the door. I declined, not wanting anyone to see me this way, fragile and slow. He waited until I was inside before pulling away. The apartment smelled faintly of the tea I'd left on the counter that morning. I dropped my bag, peeled off the hospital bracelet, and sank onto the couch. The cushions felt flat, unwelcoming. I took my pain meds, washed them down with a gulp of water, and lay back staring at the ceiling. The anaesthesia fog was heavy, but heavier still was the weight in my chest. A familiar ache that had nothing to do with the stitches in my abdomen. Clara wheeled me toward the front lobby, her sneakers whispering over the polished floor. The air grew cooler as we passed through the double doors into the waiting area. Rows of chairs were occupied by people leaning forward expectantly, eyes glued to the doors leading from recovery. Some stood the moment a nurse appeared, rushing to help their loved one into a coat or steady their steps. Most folks have somebody waiting, Clara said quietly as she steered me past. It wasn't judgment, just fact. But the words still landed heavy. We stopped just inside the sliding doors. The cold air sliced in with every motion sensor trigger, carrying the scent of wet asphalt. I thanked Clara, and she patted my shoulder before heading back inside. Miguel's message on my phone read, "Here, silver sedan." I scanned the row of cars, spotting one with hazard lights blinking. A man in a thick jacket was helping a woman into the back seat. I assumed it was Miguel, but as I approached, the driver gave me a confused look. "Lauren?" he asked. "Yes," I said, relief flooding me. He shook his head. "I'm here for Maria." I stepped back, cheeks heating despite the cold. My phone buzzed again. It was Miguel, saying he just arrived parked near the far end. I hobbled down the curb, the winter wind threading icy fingers through my thin post-op sweater. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My body started to tremble, the anaesthesia haze mixing with the chill. I shifted from foot to foot, hugging my arms. People came and went, most leaning on someone else, their breath fogging the air in soft bursts. Finally, a silver sedan rolled up. Miguel jumped out, apologising. "Sorry, mix up," at the other entrance. He opened the door and I slid in, the seat cold against my back. We pulled away from the curb. I exhaled slowly, the heater's gradual warmth creeping into my bones. Traffic was light, the sky a dull slate. I stared out the passenger window, letting the city blur. We slowed at a red light near the airport exit. That's when I saw her. Through the glass of the rideshare's passenger side window, across 2 lanes in the back of a glossy black SUV, Brooke. Her phone held high, lips moving in the familiar cadence of a live stream. The glow from her screen lit her face, eyes wide with practiced excitement. Behind her, the airport drop-off zone bustled with travellers. The light changed before my brain caught up. Miguel accelerated, and the SUV turned into the departure lane. For a moment, I wasn't cold anymore. I was burning while I stood outside a surgical centre, stitches pulling, the wind cutting through me. She'd been 10 minutes away, close enough to see if she'd cared to look. And instead, she was broadcasting herself to strangers, smile fixed, voice lifted, building content while I stood alone in the cold. I closed my eyes, leaning back into the seat. Miguel glanced at me in the mirror, but didn't ask. By the time we reached my building, the brief flare of heat had cooled into something heavier. Not the sharp sting of betrayal, something slower, more final, a quiet knowing. Miguel offered to help me to the door again, but I shook my head. I wanted to cross that lobby on my own 2 feet, no matter how unsteady. Inside, I pressed my back to the door after it clicked shut, letting the silence settle. My phone was still in my hand. I didn't open Instagram, didn't check messages. I just set it face down on the counter, the black screen, a mirror I didn't want to look into. It was 3 days after the surgery when the call came. I'd been dozing on the couch, the afternoon light slanting weakly through the blinds, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse, still scratchy from anaesthesia. "Hi, is this Lauren Hayes?" The voice was polite, professional. "This is Mary from Riverside Surgical Centre. Your mother called earlier, trying to reach you. I just wanted to confirm your condition, as per your consent form." I sat up a little, the blanket pooling at my waist. "She called the hospital?" "Yes, she said she hadn't heard from you and was worried. We didn't give out any personal details, of course, but she was quite persistent. Eventually, I told her that everything went well, you'd been discharged, and transported home via Uber." My mouth went dry. "Right. Thank you for letting me know." Mary hesitated, then added gently, "She seemed surprised you didn't have someone there with you." "She's sorry. A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. "Yeah, surprised." We ended the call, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time, the words looping in my head. She had my number. She could have called me directly, but instead she went through the hospital. Maybe for show, maybe to stage a rescue she never intended to make. 5 minutes later, the family group chat lit up. "Mum, Lauren, why didn't you tell us you were going alone? You should have said something. I just assumed you had someone else." Another ping. Mum again. "I talked to the hospital. That wasn't okay." Then Brooke. "Wait, you actually went through with it alone? Are you serious? I feel kind of bad now, like not bad, but you should have said if you were desperate." The word landed like a slap. Desperate. As if asking for a ride home after surgery was some kind of begging. I didn't respond. My thumb pressed down on the chat settings, scrolled to archive chat, and hit confirm. The thread vanished from my main screen, blessed quiet. I was halfway through a lukewarm mug of tea when my phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming FaceTime from Brooke. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. 30 seconds later, it started again. "Fine," I answered. Her face filled the screen, sun-bronzed, hair in braids threaded with beads, a wide-brimmed hat tilted just enough to frame her features. Behind her, the muted turquoise of a resort pool shimmered in the background. "Hey," she said, voice high and sweet, like we were just catching up. I didn't bother to smile. "I didn't realise you were going alone," she continued, as if the last week had been a simple misunderstanding. "I thought maybe you had a friend or a neighbour or something." "I asked you," I said flatly. Brooke rolled her eyes. "I know, but you didn't make it seem serious. It was just what was it, a laparoscopy? I mean, technically surgery, but..." She waved a hand. "You're fine now, right?" I said nothing. "Anyway," she went on, "I talked to Mum and we're thinking maybe we should fly back early. The vibes here are kind of off anyway." I blinked slowly. "Because of my surgery?" "Well, yeah, and Mum's upset. She keeps saying we look like monsters, which is like dramatic, but yeah." "You don't need to come back," I said, her brows pinched. "Wait, what?" "I don't need anything from you, Brooke." Before she could speak again, I hit end call. The screen went black. The FaceTime alert popped up again almost instantly. I swiped left, tapped block caller, and set the phone face down on the table. My stitches ached from sitting up too long, but I didn't care. The conversation, if you could call it that, had left a different kind of ache, deeper and more familiar. The truth was sinking in, heavier than the anaesthesia ever had. I wasn't part of their plans. I never had been, not unless it was convenient. And now, without the benefit of convenience, I was simply optional. The tea had gone cold. I drained it anyway, the bitterness sitting on my tongue. In the quiet, I realised I wasn't angry about being alone for the surgery. I was angry about how unsurprising it was. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to face whatever came next. This is Lauren. Hi, Ms. Hayes. This is Mary again from Riverside Surgical Centre. I just wanted to make you aware. When your mother called yesterday, she didn't just ask about your condition. She also pressed for your exact discharge time. I sat up straighter. Why? She said she wanted to be sure the staff didn't release you too early without proper care, but she seemed more concerned with the timing than with speaking to you directly. Mary hesitated, as if weighing whether she'd already said too much. It felt like she was looking for something to question, to find fault, to build a case. It landed in my gut like a stone. Thank you for telling me, I said, though my voice came out tight. We hung up and I opened my phone to clear notifications. That's when I saw Brooke's name, not in my messages, but in a screenshot sent by a number I didn't recognise. The image was from the family group chat. My mistake, circled in red, with Brooke's caption underneath, "She's so dramatic." A string of laughing emojis followed, along with comments from numbers I didn't know, probably her friends. My stomach turned, but I kept scrolling through the thread. In one bubble, Brooke had added, "Classic Lauren, always making herself the victim." The ache in my stitches was nothing compared to the one spreading through my chest. A second text came through from the unknown number. "Hey, it's Kelly. We had chem class together in high school. I'm in a group chat with some of Brooke's friends. Thought you should see this, Kelly." I hadn't thought about her in years. She'd been quiet, smart, the kind of person who noticed things. "Thanks for sending," I typed back, my hands trembling. "I appreciate it." "She's been making fun of you all week," Kelly replied. "It's gross. I'm sorry." I stared at the words, the reality settling in like cold water. While I was recovering, counting the hours between pain meds, Brooke was performing my vulnerability for her audience, her friends, her brand, anyone who would laugh. The shock came first, sharp and bright, then the hurt, deep and raw. I let it sit, pressing into the ache like a bruise I needed to understand. But beneath it, something else was waking up. Hot, steady, unwilling to be smoothed over. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. The room was still cluttered from surgery day. Pill bottles, water glasses, an unopened envelope from my insurance provider. My hands gripped the counter edge until my knuckles whitened. They didn't just ignore me. They made me into a joke. The anger was clean, almost clarifying. It cut through the fog I'd been living in since the surgery, slicing the quiet grief into something I could use. I picked up my phone again, not to reply to Brooke, not to confront Mom, but to start saving everything. Screenshots, call logs, timestamps, a record, not for revenge, for the truth, because someday they would try to tell this story their way. And when they did, I'd have every word, every image, every piece of proof of what really happened. And for the first time in days, I felt steady. The knock came late in the afternoon, sharp enough to cut through the hum of my space heater. I froze halfway between the couch and the kitchen, unsure if I'd imagined it. Then it came again, 3 quick raps, the kind Mum always used before letting herself in, back when I still gave her a key. I peered through the peephole. Evelyn Hayes stood on the other side, purse clutched to her chest like a shield. Her hair was neatly pinned, her coat a little too light for the February chill. She looked smaller than I remembered. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Lauren," she said, her voice thin, "I didn't know." "Yes, you did," I replied, her mouth tightened. "I didn't think you'd really go through with it without telling us more." "I told you the date. I told you I needed a ride. That was the message." We stood there, the hallway air cold on my ankles. Finally, she asked, "Can I come in?" I stepped back just enough for her to enter. She moved to the armchair across from the couch, but didn't take off her coat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she glanced at the coffee table where the white pharmacy bag still sat. The label faced outward, $312.46 in bold black print. "What's that?" she asked. "The pain meds out of pocket." "You didn't use the insurance card?" I almost laughed. Couldn't. It was maxed out. Her brow furrowed. "That's impossible." I reached for the manila folder on the side table and pulled out the printout from my provider. I slid it across to her. "Botox sessions billed under my policy, Beverly Hills Clinic, last month." She scanned the page, her fingers tightening on the paper. Brooke said it was for migraines. "Then why is the provider's address a salon?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, a flash of something, guilt maybe, before she looked away. "Do you have any idea what it's like being her mother?" she said suddenly, voice trembling. "She's always needed so much. And you," she stopped herself. "I wasn't supposed to need anything, right?" I finished for her. "That's not what I meant." "It's what you've done," I said, my voice flat. "You told me not to guilt you when I asked for a single ride. After years of carrying this family, that's what I get." Her shoulders sagged, but I didn't mistake it for understanding. "I just want things to go back to how they were," she murmured. "No," I said, leaning forward. "That's not going to happen." Her eyes widened a little, like the idea had never crossed her mind. "Lauren, I'm not the safety net anymore. Not for you, not for Brooke. You'll have to find another way." She stared at me for a long moment, then looked down at the paper in her hands, folding it once, then again, until it was a small square. She tucked it into her purse without meeting my eyes. When she finally stood, I didn't walk her to the door. She paused at the threshold, as if waiting for me to say something. I didn't. The door closed softly behind her, but the air she left behind felt heavier than before. Evelyn didn't sit right away. She set her purse on the armchair, then lifted a glossy paper bag onto the coffee table between us. "I brought you something," she said. The bag bore the logo of a luxury resort gift shop, palm trees, gold foil lettering. I reached in and pulled out a sun hat, the tag still attached, followed by a small box of chocolates, their corners slightly melted. "From Cabo," she added. "We thought you'd like a little treat." I turned the hat over in my hands. "Did you buy this for me?" She hesitated just long enough. "Well, they were extras. We didn't have room in the suitcase." The hat went back into the bag. "So, leftovers." Her mouth opened, but I didn't give her the chance. I slid the insurance printout across the table. The highlighted Botox charges glaring under the lamp. "You can take these back to Brooke, too. She might need them more since she already used my insurance for her beauty treatments." Evelyn's lips tightened. She told me it was for migraines. I tapped the provider's address. Migraine therapy happens in a medical office, not a Beverly Hills salon. The silence between us sharpened. She gripped the armrests like she needed to steady herself. "Do you have any idea what she's been through?" "Yes," I said. "Exactly as much as she tells you, and exactly as much as you choose to believe." Her gaze hardened, but before she could speak, movement caught my eye through the narrow strip of glass beside the door. A figure leaned against the opposite wall, phone raised. Brooke. The faint glow from her screen lit her face in quick pulses, the telltale shimmer of a live stream. She was angled just so, catching snippets of our voices, without revealing the apartment number. My jaw locked. I stood, crossed the room, and yanked open the door. She flinched, lowering the phone a fraction. "Whoa, chill. I'm not showing your face." "You're broadcasting this?" Her eyes darted past me toward Evelyn, then back. "My followers like real life. It's just background, nothing specific." "It's my life," I snapped. From the couch, Evelyn's voice wavered. "Brooke, maybe..." But I was already stepping into the hallway, close enough to see the comments scrolling on her screen. "Family drama? Spill? OMG, is that your sis?" "End it," I said. Brooke's thumb hovered over the button, but her smirk said she was enjoying this far too much. "You're overreacting." I reached forward and pressed my palm over the camera lens. The screen went black. "Not anymore." She jerked back, clutching the phone to her chest. "You just killed my live." "Good." For a second, the hallway was nothing but the sound of our breathing, hers fast and shallow, mine steady because I refused to give her more fuel. Evelyn appeared in the doorway behind me, her face pale. "Brooke, go home." Brooke's jaw tightened, but she turned on her heel, muttering something about control freak as she disappeared toward the elevator. I stepped back inside and closed the door. The click of the deadbolt was louder than it needed to be. Evelyn stood there, clutching the resort bag to her chest now. "I didn't know she was..." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. Her eyes dropped. The weight in the room shifted, thicker now. Whatever she had come here to salvage, it wasn't going to happen. 2 days passed before Brooke showed up again. This time she didn't knock, just pounded on the door in a rapid, insistent rhythm. When I opened it, she was in airport sweats, designer sunglasses perched like a crown on her head. Her hair was still braided from Cabo, but her skin had lost the warm glow, replaced by a faint blotchiness. "Can we talk?" she said, stepping forward like she might push past me. I blocked the doorway with my arm. "About what?" She gave a sharp laugh. "You really went behind my back to ruin me." It took me a second to realise what she meant. "You mean telling your sponsor the truth?" I asked. Her expression twisted. "You sent them screenshots. You didn't even warn me they pulled the campaign. Do you have any idea what that cost me?" "About 10,000, right?" I said evenly. Her eyes narrowed. "Exactly. And for what? Some petty revenge?" I shook my head. "Not revenge. Accountability. They deserve to know what kind of wellness trip they were paying for." The memory of hitting send on that email was still fresh. I had kept it short, professional, explained the situation, attached screenshots of her mocking my surgery in the family chat, noted the date of her trip and the procedure I underwent alone. No embellishment, no dramatic flourish, just facts. The reply from the sponsor had been just as concise. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take our partnerships seriously. The matter has been addressed." Brooke crossed her arms. "You're unbelievable." "And you," I said, "have been unchecked for years." We stared at each other until she broke first, muttering something under her breath and storming off towards the elevator. I closed the door, locking it behind her, and leaned against it for a long moment. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. Later that afternoon, an email from Riverside Surgical Centre landed in my inbox. Refund processed, $312.46. The note was brief, explaining that an internal review had confirmed inappropriate third-party use of my insurance plan. The charge was reversed to my account. It wasn't a windfall, but the timing made it feel like more than money. It felt like a crack in the wall they'd built around my boundaries. That night, I opened my laptop and started browsing for a new sofa. The one in my living room sagged in the middle, its cushions permanently dented from years of hosting other people's crises. I found a turquoise one, firm, clean lines, the kind of colour that made me think of clear skies instead of storm clouds. 2 days later it arrived. The delivery guys manoeuvred it into the corner by the window, the late winter sun catching the fabric just right. I stood there a long time after they left, running my hand over the smooth upholstery. The next morning I added something else to my apartment. A coffee machine, not a fancy one, just reliable, mine. The first pot I brewed filled the place with a smell I hadn't realised I missed. I sat on the new sofa, mug in hand, and for a moment the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I didn't check Brooke's Instagram that day. I didn't need to. The day after the turquoise sofa arrived, I woke to the ping of a new email. At first, I thought it was another bill, but the subject line stopped me. Thank you. Regarding Brooke Hayes' partnership, it was from the sponsor. Lauren, the message began, we appreciate you taking the time to share this with us. Transparency matters, and we value working with individuals who uphold the integrity of our brand. Your clarity and documentation made our decision straightforward. Thank you for your honesty. I reread the line about integrity 3 times, not because I doubted what I'd done, but because it felt foreign for someone to thank me for drawing a line, especially when it was against my own family. The email was short, professional, but it was the subtext that lingered. I had been believed. I closed my laptop and made coffee, the smell rising warm and steady. I sat on the sofa, watching the steam curl from my mug, letting that small victory sink in. By noon, another message arrived, this time on Facebook Messenger from an unfamiliar account. The profile picture was of a coastline at sunset, but the name made my breath catch. Nate Collier, Brooke's ex-boyfriend. Hey Lauren, it began. I know this is out of the blue, but I saw what happened with the sponsorship. I just wanted to say thank you. You're the first person who's ever actually called her out. I broke things off because of the way she treated people, friends, strangers, even me. Seeing you stand up to her, it makes me feel less crazy. Before I could respond, another message popped up, a series of image files. I clicked the first and saw a screen capture of Brooke in a private group chat, laughing at a friend's medical scare. The next image showed her mocking a fellow influencer's weight gain. The third was her complaining about having to visit Mom when Evelyn was in the hospital last year. Each one landed like a confirmation of what I'd known, but couldn't prove, that her cruelty wasn't reserved for me. Do what you want with these, Nate wrote. I just thought you should have them. I stared at the folder on my desktop, my cursor hovering over it. Part of me wanted to forward it to everyone she'd ever wronged. But another part, the part that had been burned too many times, knew that wasn't my fight. I typed back, thank you for trusting me. I'm not going to spread these. But I'm glad to know I wasn't imagining things. Nate replied with a simple thumbs up emoji. I closed the conversation and leaned back, the sofa firm against my shoulders. The coffee had gone cold, but I didn't move to reheat it. The victories of the past few days, small as they were, had shifted something in me. I felt steadier, like my life had edges again. That feeling lasted until my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Lauren, please. You have to help Brooke. She's devastated. People are talking. This is going to follow her career. We need to fix it before it gets worse. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. We, as if I were part of this, as if protecting the family's image was still my responsibility. A second text followed. I know you're upset, but think about how this looks. You don't want to be the reason your sister's reputation is destroyed. The urge to laugh rose in my throat, sharp and humorless. Destroyed? Brooke had been destroying her own reputation for years. I just stopped shielding her from the consequences. I typed back, no, just that. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. A minute later, another message came. I'm begging you. We can't have people thinking this family eats its own. I set the phone face down on the coffee table, the screen still lighting up with each incoming text until it finally stopped. The quiet after was like an exhale. I sipped the last of my cold coffee and let the bitterness settle. Brooke's sponsorship was gone. My $312 was back in my account, and I had no intention of undoing either. Because this wasn't about revenge, it never had been. It was about finally refusing to be the cleanup crew for their messes. I glanced around my apartment, the turquoise sofa, the coffee machine, the neat stack of medical papers on the side table, small things maybe, but they were mine, and I wasn't giving them back. The locksmith arrived on a grey Tuesday morning, his breath visible in the air as he carried his tools up the stairs. I'd called him the night before, the decision made in the space between 2 of Mum's pleading texts. No more unexpected visits, no more keys that went missing and magically found their way into Brooke's hands. The old lock came off with a metallic clink. The new one was heavier, the bolt sliding into place with a satisfying, solid sound. When the locksmith handed me the new keys, I turned one over in my palm, the cool metal warming against my skin. My door, my lock, my rules. That afternoon, I drove to a small community centre on the east side. I'd passed it countless times, but never gone in. The flyer for pottery classes had been tacked to my fridge for months. Something I'd told myself I'd try when things settled down. They never did, until now. The classroom smelled faintly of clay and kiln heat. My instructor, a woman with hands permanently dusted in white, showed me how to wedge the clay, how to feel for air bubbles. The wheel's hum was low and steady, the kind of sound that invited your thoughts to slow down. My first attempt at a mug was lopsided, thick in some places, and thin in others. But it stood on its own, and for the first time in weeks, so did I. 2 days later, I sat across from my lawyer, a lean man with silver hair and a desk that looked like it had been organised with a ruler. The document in front of me was simple. A formal declaration that I would no longer be financially responsible for any debts, obligations, or liabilities incurred by Evelyn or Brooke Hayes. I signed my name in blue ink, the pen gliding easily. It felt almost ceremonial, severing the last invisible tether that had kept me tied to their chaos. When I left his office, the winter sun was already dipping low, turning the sky a muted gold. I walked to my car with my hands deep in my pockets, the folded copy of the document warm from my coat lining. That night, my phone buzzed with a call from Lily, my cousin on Mom's side. We hadn't spoken in months, but her voice was the same, quick, a little breathless, like she was always hurrying to get the truth out before she lost her nerve. "Hey, I just wanted to check in," she began. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. "I'm getting there." "Why?" There was a pause, then, "Because your mum and Brooke telling people you had some kind of emotional breakdown, that you're lashing out and making up stories to get attention. The words landed heavily, but not unexpectedly. Figures, I said. I didn't believe them, Lily added quickly. I know you, but they've been talking to the aunts, some family friends. You might want to be prepared. I leaned back on the turquoise sofa, tracing the seam of the cushion with my finger. Thanks for telling me. I wish I could do more, she said. You just did. We talked for a few more minutes, small things, old memories, before hanging up. Afterward, I sat in the quiet, letting her words settle. This was their pattern. Control the narrative, make me the unstable one, the problem. And for years, I'd played into it by defending myself, by trying to prove them wrong. Not this time. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me wasn't desperate to be understood anymore. She didn't need their version of the story to match her own. They could spin whatever they wanted. I had my own truth, and for once I wasn't giving it away. The next time I saw my lawyer, it was supposed to be a quick follow-up, just to confirm the financial liability document was filed and recorded. He adjusted his glasses, leafing through a small stack of papers, when his hand paused. Lauren, he said slowly, did you co-sign for a business line of credit last year? My stomach tightened. No. He slid a photocopy across the desk. My name was at the bottom, scrawled in a handwriting that was just close enough to pass at a glance. Above it was a credit agreement for $15,000, opened 6 months ago, tied to an address I didn't recognise. The air in the office seemed to thin. That's not my signature, I said. I didn't think so, he replied. But it's active, and the payments are months behind. We can challenge it as fraud, but we'll need to document everything, comparisons to your actual signature, proof you had no connection to the account holder. The name on the account was C. Hayes Consulting. My pulse thudded in my ears. Evelyn. The calm I'd been building for weeks trembled at the edges. I had expected petty smears, maybe more emotional manipulation, but this was theft. Paper trail theft. I want it challenged immediately, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. When I left his office, the winter air slapped my face like a reminder to stay awake. The keys in my pocket felt heavier than usual, as if the new locks were the only thing holding back the flood. Back home, I tried to distract myself with clay. I sat at my wheel, the cool weight of it in my hands, the hum filling the kitchen. But the moment my phone buzzed with another notification, the form I was shaping collapsed under my fingers. It was a voicemail from Riverside Surgical Centre. I hit play. Ms. Hayes, this is just a courtesy call. Your mother contacted us earlier today asking to update your emergency contact file to include her again. We reminded her that, per your written request, you've designated no family contacts at this time. She seemed insistent. We wanted you to be aware. I wiped my hands on a towel, my chest tightening. So she was trying to get herself back on my records, back into my private medical life without my consent. The thought of her sitting there spinning some story about why she needed to be my emergency contact again made my skin prickle. She wasn't doing it to protect me. She was doing it to control me, to make sure she could step in if she needed to manage the optics. I sat down on the turquoise sofa, pressing my palms into my knees until they tingled. Weeks ago, this would have sent me spiralling into old patterns, explaining myself, trying to keep the peace. But I wasn't in that place anymore. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "You ruined my career. Happy now?" I didn't need to ask who it was. Brooke. The name wasn't there, but the tone, the self-pity masquerading as outrage, it was hers. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen. I could have ignored it. I could have deleted it, blocked the number without a word. Instead, I typed, "I didn't ruin your career. You did. I just stopped covering for you." 3 dots appeared, blinked, disappeared, then nothing. The silence felt cleaner than any apology she could have mustered. I set the phone aside, the weight in my chest easing as I stood and walked back to the pottery wheel. The collapsed lump of clay was still there, waiting. I pressed my thumbs into the centre, coaxing it upward, the shape slowly taking form again. It wasn't perfect, neither was I, but it was standing. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I wasn't letting them pull me back into their storm. Not now, not ever. The mornings had taken on a new rhythm. I woke without the jolt of dread that used to sit on my chest before I even opened my eyes. No mental inventory of potential crises waiting for me in my phone. Just the sound of the kettle warming on the stove, the faint hum of the heater, the slant of winter light pooling on the floor. The turquoise sofa faced the window now, angled just right so I could watch the city wake. I'd sip coffee from my lopsided mug, the one I'd made in pottery class, imperfect, but sturdy, and feel the heat seep into my hands. Some days I'd read, other days I'd just sit there, letting the quiet be its own kind of company. There was no guilt in it anymore, no voice in my head reminding me that stillness was selfish. One Saturday, I decided to walk to the farmer's market. The air was crisp, the kind that flushed your cheeks and made every breath feel sharp. I wandered between stalls, the smell of fresh bread mixing with roasted coffee and the faint sweetness of winter citrus. I was scanning a display of potted herbs when a voice behind me said my name. "Lauren." I turned to see Maya, a friend from high school I hadn't seen in years. She looked almost the same. Bright eyes, quick smile. But there was something in the way she studied me, like she was taking in the space I occupied now compared to then. "Wow," she said. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look calm." I laughed softly. "That's new." "I always wondered how you stayed so composed back then," she said, picking up a bunch of rosemary. "Now I get it. You weren't calm. You were surviving." The words landed with more weight than she probably intended. She was right. I hadn't been calm. I'd been contained, controlled, holding everything in so nothing spilled over. We talked for a few minutes, catching up in broad strokes. She didn't ask about my family, and I didn't offer. When we said goodbye, she hugged me tightly, like she meant it. Back home, I brewed another pot of coffee and sat at my desk. The light was softer now, afternoon settling in. I opened a blank document and began to type. Not an email, not a message I would send, but a letter I needed to write. "I hope someday you understand what you lost. But even if you don't, I haven't lost myself, not anymore." The words came easily, no pauses to edit, no need to soften the edges. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation or a demand for an apology. It was a line in the sand, written for me, not for them. When I finished, I read it once, then closed the file without saving. I didn't need a record. The act of writing it was enough. I stepped into the living room, coffee mug in hand, and settled onto the sofa. Outside, the sky was shifting toward evening, the first lights blinking on in neighbouring windows. I thought about all the years I'd spent bracing for the next request, the next crisis, the next way they'd make my life smaller to keep theirs bigger. And I realised with a kind of quiet astonishment that I didn't miss them, not the way they were. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen. I let it sit. The coffee in my hands was still warm, the view from my window still mine. And for the first time in my life, the thought of done didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning I could actually choose. 3 days after I wrote the letter I never intended to send, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. My name was written in looping cursive I recognised instantly. Brooke's handwriting, the kind she used for holiday cards and thank you notes to sponsors. For a moment, I just stood there in the lobby, the envelope balanced in my hand. The weight of it felt deliberate, like it contained more than just paper. I carried it upstairs, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it while the kettle heated. I told myself I wouldn't open it. But curiosity can be loud. I slid a butter knife under the flap and unfolded the stationery inside. The first line was exactly what I expected. I'm sorry. But by the second paragraph, the apology began to twist. She wrote about how much the sponsorship loss had hurt her, how she knew she'd made mistakes in the heat of the moment, but also how we could fix this together. The fix, as it turned out, was me posting about her growth journey on my social media accounts, telling my small but loyal following that Brooke had been misunderstood, that we'd reconciled. She even suggested a joint photo shoot, just casual, cosy sister vibes. The words swam in front of me. This wasn't an apology. It was a rebrand. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and took it straight to the mailbox at the end of the block. Without a note, without even breaking the seal a second time, I dropped it inside, the metal lid clanging shut, returned to sender. Walking back to my building, I felt lighter. Inside, the kettle had long since gone silent. I poured the hot water over fresh grounds, the rich scent filling the kitchen. I carried my mug to the turquoise sofa, the fabric catching the late afternoon sun in a way that made it glow. I sat down, curling my legs beneath me, and took a slow sip. The coffee was strong, just the way I liked it. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythm. Cars in the distance, a dog barking somewhere below, the faint hum of life continuing without me needing to chase it. On the table beside me, my phone buzzed once. I didn't reach for it. The light shifted, stretching across the cushions, warm against my arm. I let my eyes close for a moment, the quiet wrapping around me like a blanket. The ride I needed never came. I still made it home.